We're ready to roll. So we want to thank everybody for joining us today for our 94th OPN event, the Founders Funding Couch. And today we've got an exceptional panel. I'm very excited to dive in. Up and coming right at the front, we have Valerie Song, founder and CEO of Ava Technologies. Trung Pham, from founder and CEO of Rise, which was, you can see Access in the background with the rebranding and a relaunch. And then Kevin Mako, president of Mako Design. So just to jump in so that we can all get a little bit more familiarized with everybody. Valerie, why not give us 30 seconds about yourself and one thing nobody knows about you, just to start this off.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company that makes these things, which are smart indoor gardening devices. Kind of like if you can imagine an espresso for gardening. We have these pod packs that have these little pods in there. So it's everything your plants need to grow, all in one neat little package. All you have to do is download the app, connect to Wi-Fi, and then add water, and pretty much your plants will grow for you. And one thing that people on this call might not know about me is that I have a little doggy, and he is a mixture of Pomeranian and Husky. And as you can imagine, it's a very big dog and a very small dog. So fun fact, they're actually artificially inseminated.
Very cool. Awesome. I like to see that. Being innovative in the pet sector. All right, Trung, why don't you jump in next?
Hi guys, my name is Trung. I'm the CEO of a company called Rise. We recently did a rebrand from Access, and we create smart devices that allow you to motorize and automate your existing window shades. This is our second generation device, so we've gone through multiple iterations and can definitely share some experience around that on the hardware side. And fun fact about me, I love golf, and I'm actually going to be moving to a condo where I could install a golf simulator because of this whole lockdown. So that's the fun fact about me.
I love it. That's awesome. Sticking into your sport and bringing it right home with you. That's good. I love it.
Exactly.
Kevin, you're up.
Fun fact about me, I need to hang out with Trung more so I can use his golf simulator.
Yeah. If you're downtown, swing by anytime.
Sounds great. So we're actually a Canadian design firm, born and raised in Canada for product design, all in hardware. We've expanded to the US. So now we've got our 3 offices, 3.5 now actually with our new San Francisco office, with no boots on the ground. So in Toronto, Austin, Miami, and San Francisco. Our focus as a product design firm is exclusively on doing global caliber, professional grade hardware design, but tailored to small businesses and startups.
I love it. And the one thing that you're going to throw in there now, that even though I'm sure you're going to be golfing with Trung, but what's that one thing?
Yeah, actually my my COVID hobby, if you will, is I took up flying. So I'm almost through learning to become just a private recreational pilot, which is a blast. But let me tell you, it is absolutely nerve-wracking as well.
Awesome. I took up jumping out of planes a few years back. So maybe I can be one of your test, I don't know, crew or something. So that way I could use my skills.
Sure. Hey, if you know what you're doing, by all means.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, welcome everybody. And I'm so glad to have everybody here today. And the whole topic was around how do we take the hard out of hardware? And we've had many discussions over this over the years, and investors and everybody alike, they always have this fear about hardware. And for myself, I actually have this excitement because it's a tangible product. And anything that you can put in your hand, I think you can sell. And if you know a good way to get in front of the right audience, I think that really opens up the door. And maybe what we can do is we can start on the Trung side, because Trung, there's one thing that you've been in the market, you've been doing this for a while, and now you've kind of rebranded yourself. And you've been selling these products, you're getting into your Gen 2, you've got other products, but can you give us a little bit of an idea of what got you started in the hardware side and kind of where you've ended up now going through this journey?
Definitely. So the company was started back in around 2015, and it was started because of a personal problem I faced where I was moving to a new condo downtown Toronto. And, you know, when you get your own place, you tend to spend quite a bit of money on home decor, a new bed, a new couch, stuff like that. So I was investing a lot in, you know, traditional things that you need, but I always wanted motorized shades and automated shades. When I went to get quoted on them, I discovered they were about $1,000 per window, super expensive. So I opted for manually cord operated shades. And then a couple months later, when the summer came around, I went back to the same designer because my condo was getting super hot from the sunlight. And I told them, hey, listen, I want to get automated shades. I just bought these shades from you a couple months ago. How can I upgrade? And that's when I actually learned that you cannot motorize and automate your shades once you've installed them. You got to replace them. So I thought that was silly. I thought that would be a retrofit solution, a simple motor that you put on the window frame. And they told me a product like that doesn't exist. And sure enough, they were right. So that kind of led me down the path of developing the first retrofit device to automate existing window shades. So throughout 2015, 16, and 17, we were just doing R&D and going through manufacturing in China. Began shipping towards the end of 2017, scaling online sales in 2018, 19. And last year we had a tough year because of COVID, but we're here, we're still surviving. And definitely a lot of support from the government, not only with COVID, but with a clean tech grant that we secured, about 3.88 million, to begin developing products for the commercial real estate market. And again, addressing the issue of solar heat gain in the commercial space that inevitably consumes a lot of energy.
Awesome. So you kind of went through this nice little journey of finding a problem, focusing on it, building a product that fit it. And Ava, you've kind of done the same thing. Can you give us a bit more idea on how your journey started?
Yeah, so I feel like I echo a lot of what Chung said, but maybe a year or two behind him. So very similar thing. You know, I actually started my career in brand management at Fortune 500 companies. And when I was there, you know, I got a really good taste of, you know, what it's like to have a little portfolio, manage a budget and launch products. But there was always something missing for me where I really wanted to work on products that I really cared about and they were good for the earth, you know, values aligned. And there were some brands that really aligned with me and some that really just weren't there for me. So I actually had quit my job and I moved into a new condo, kind of exactly like what Trung said. And I faced this issue of, you know, as someone who loves to cook, loves to eat, and loves trying different brands and different cuisines, I wanted to be able to access fresh ingredients just at my fingertips instead of getting, you know, those plastic packages that always die or you forget about it in the back of your fridge. And the moment you need to use it, it's gone, it's withered, it's gross, and it's soggy. So I really wanted to have a solution for that. And when it came to Vancouver in the wintertime, there was no way that anything would really survive the winter, and it's dark for many months of the year. So I thought there must be a better solution to keep plants indoors alive all year round. And so very similar story there. I decided to start working on it, met my co-founder as well. And he actually was a chef turned product designer. So it was a really good kind of synergy between more of a business, sales and marketing mind and a product oriented person. We teamed up and then we started developing this product that became Ava today.
Awesome. And that both great stories, and they do align nicely. And they align nicely because now they're going to tie into what Kevin does, which is he looks at both of you and says, wow, this is a business here, and I think I can help you guys. Kevin, can you give us an idea of kind of where you started and why you got into the opposite side of this scenario and how you get into supporting this ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. You know what, before I blab about myself, I just want to say, like, listening to Valerie and Trunk's story, like, totally warms my heart, because the amazing thing is, if you hear about what they both said, is it all just started from like this snap aha moment in their own personal lives. We've worked with almost 1,500 clients at this point in time, and the vast majority of them, it happened the same way. It was just a pain point in their own life. The key thing that happened there is they both took action on it. And you know, I'm sure we'll jump into that in a bit, but really look at it today, only a few years later, and they've both built businesses which will sustain them and help thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people over the future. Help their lives, but also change their lives as founders, all because they saw an opportunity and they acted on it. So it's incredible. My story is a little bit different. I've been doing this now. I'm 36. I've been doing this for over 20 years. Do the math. That puts me back in high school when I started with this concept, when I had my own product ideas. And I said, how the heck did I get these things made? Same thing. Nowhere out there. No design firm at the time even gave a ounce of care about the small folks, especially inventors. And that's where I said, oh man, there must be a better way. So I said, look, I want to be the catalyst of this. People with ideas like Valerie, like Trung, they want to do it properly though. And I'm sure we'll get into that too. How do you execute on a high caliber, high professional grade so that you get great reviews and have a stellar product out of the gate to really launch your brand? So how do you launch a world-class product as a small startup? And that was I spent the entire rest of my career since then. I incorporated it when I was in university. I went to business school, I went to the Ivy Business School, section class president there, picked my litter of jobs, turned them all down, went to Hong Kong University to study supply chain management and manufacturing, came back in 2007, 50K in student debt, said, I can't take these jobs now. Let me try this business. And if I fail, like, please don't forget about me and ignore the fact that I have a bankruptcy on my history now, and please let me back in the door. So in any case, that was at 2007, bam, first major crash of my career. And that was how I started my business. So it took a lot more effort, I think, than it might have, but I survived. And whether it's hard work, a bit of luck, a combination in there, we're now, a major design center with, like I say, offices around the place, many products designed. We're the largest physical product design agency in the country and Canada. Still a blip on the radar in the US, but we're growing there as we kind of build our North American presence.
Amazing. And I wholeheartedly support the drive and the excitement that you just shared about the two startups and where you came in. What I love about this is that you've got a real good mix of two startups that found a problem, jumped into it, and threw everything away and said, I'm going to solve this. And then yourself saying, taking the reverse side of this, I want to build these products so that these people can actually go to market, because there's a lot of ideas. And if those ideas can get behind the right company, man, we can do a lot of magical things. So I think that that's a great starting point. And maybe what we can go into, and only because even this is going to be fresh, it's new, you just started this the last couple of years, maybe you can give us a bit of a background on, as Kevin mentioned, how do I make a great product? Like you started off, and the one thing that I took note of right away that, you had a great co-founder that had a different exceptional experience than you did. And the two of you were able to come up with something that obviously has taken the market by storm. Can you give us an idea of what that looks like and how you went into designing that first product?
Yeah, sure. So I think it takes, a few things that make up the magic, and totally agree with everything else you guys have said as well. But for me, as a very moral compass guided person, I would say the first one for me has to be values alignment, really knowing, what your company is trying to achieve, especially in the longer term, what your vision is, and why you're doing it. That's super important. Another thing is being close to your customers. I think that thing has been something we have learned a little bit of the hard way, where it's not just, you build your product, you ship it, and then you hear about the customers. It's, hand in hand when you're prototyping, and even when you're ideating, you should already be talking to prospective customers. So surveying early on, A/B testing early on, super important. So you're not building the wrong product and you just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars tooling something that no one wants. So that was really important to us. And the third thing for us, I think, as more of our strength is the aesthetic factor. I think there has to be something that differentiates us from other things out there. And we've historically just been a little bit stronger on the branding side, the visual look and appeal, and really connecting with our audience and really communicating that story. So I think these three things really bode well for us as a company.
And Trung, when you guys were working on your second unit or your second product, how much of the first iteration that you did to build this successful product, how much of that had to change? How much of it did you say, man, we really learned our lesson here, we need to do this completely different?
So I'll describe the actual time frame it took, and that will give you a good idea. But the first gen product took 2 years to develop. And that includes the entire, from the first day you do the sketches to the first units coming off the assembly line. That took 2 years. The second gen product took 6 months. So you can see the reduction in the amount of time it took, because you learn a lot with the first gen. And the first gen, we actually fell into the trap that a lot of engineers do in the Valley, but you over-engineer it. You put all the bells and whistles in, and Kevin will kind of allude to this a little later, but you don't focus on solving one core product or one core problem that the product should solve. So we were trying to do too many things at the first gen. We eventually stripped out a lot of the features, both on the software side and some on the hardware side, as we went through the first gen development. But we simplified a lot of it as we launched the second gen. At the same time of launching the second gen and even simplifying it, we made the product faster, stronger, and quieter. So to us, it was a lot more robust. It was cheaper to make, and it was a lot more simple to use.
So it sounds like taking what Valerie went through and kind of how you redone your second engine. Hopefully you guys are talking through this process, because it sounds like you could have brought a lot of value in there as well. But how much of this engineering learning and structure setup at the beginning that you go through to get to your beta, to get your alpha, to get your beta, how much of that, how much time do you think is really spent in that? And maybe Kevin, you can jump into this, because I think this is kind of crucial. It's, you should spend 6 months of your first product development just working with customers and not even having a product, like really streamlining this and really understanding what the output's going to be before you start tooling and getting into that. And maybe Kevin, you can touch on a bit of that.
Sure. Happy to jump in here. First of all, for those who are listening that haven't yet started down the journey of product development, or are wondering how it works or how you get a product to market, you're sitting on that golden nugget invention idea. First steps first is know what your goal is. That your absolute number one most important goal is manufacturing. You have to, and I know that sounds obvious, but there's a lot of mystery in the industry. People think, oh, I can license it, or maybe I'll get a patent and somebody is going to pay me for that, or I'll get some royalty deal or some partnership deal. That does not exist until you're in production and you have users, and those users say your product's great. So that's the first biggest misnomer in the industry. And it's actually not obvious. When you start typing these things into Google, it's not exactly clear in the product space, because over the years, product development has evolved, and especially startup hardware development has evolved. But that's number one. So now you're focusing on manufacturing, like Valerie did, like Trung did, getting their product out to users. And that comes now into the second thing. And Trung, I love how you mentioned your particular journey, because it really also wasn't clear when you started your path how important focus and MVP was. That really has been a major, it's been a trend that's emerged in other industries, in tech and whatnot, but in hardware, I would say 90% of the clients that come through our doors, it's all about how many features they can add to this thing, with the understanding that the more features I add, the more likely somebody's going to tip the purchasing point. And that is exactly opposite from reality. The key is to find as tight of a possible niche as you can find in the market, as simple as a product fit or whatever to that niche market demographic, and then create a very high quality version of that pain point. So I have a podcast. It's kind of the main product podcast for the hardware industry. It's called The Product Startup. It's on every player. I just had a executive from Apple on the show 2 days ago, Michael Hagelo, 22 years at Apple from 88 to 2010. Apple, when they made that, the first version of almost every product that they made, Steve Jobs drove their team so hard to say, like, what is the one or two key features that is going to solve a pain point for your customer demographic? And let's solve that. In fact, Steve was let go. They ended up having like 45 different product lines. He came back on, and he ended up taking it from 44 products down to 4, 2 for consumer, 2 for commercial. And that was a big company, arguably, even at the time, back in the 80s into the 90s, one of the biggest product companies in the world. If Apple focuses on MVP for their product launches, you as a startup absolutely should be focusing on MVP as a startup. Brilliant.
Well said. And what I love about that is that this isn't just take place in hardware. This is in any business you start. Hyper focus. Every time we'll see a pitch, it's always got so much into it. And really, there's one problem you're solving, not 15. Those other ones can get solved, but solve the one and reduce the amount of breakable objects, the amount of things that people won't use, like your car, for instance. It has so many gadgets you've probably never used, 99% of them, yet they keep building them in there in case one day you decide that you need that. Is it the selling feature? No, the feature that sells you is probably the color or the speed or if the aerodynamics of it. So there's always one little thing, like Kevin was saying, that you can solve on that. And what I started to think about, what is the thing that Ava's solving? And what is it that she was able to go to market with and get her audience to be really excited? And I have an idea of what I think that one thing is, Ava, but what is the thing that really sets your product aside from everybody else that you're really solving in your product?
So from a problem perspective, I think going through the similar motions that everyone else mentioned, we originally were trying to do, X, Y, Z and try to go for solving all sorts of problems. But at the end of the day, we realized the core problem for a core user are that they are plant killers who are killing plants and they need a better way to sustain their plants. They have no idea how it works, but they just want something that will grow for them and teach them how to grow properly. So that was really the core problem when we stripped away everything else. So at the end of the day, we have to make sure, hey, these things are growing and they can grow better and faster and yield more than our competitors. And once we can do those things, as a company that may be at a more premium price point and a more premium experience, we have to really deliver on a higher value experience. So whether that's supporting through customer support was something that we realized, hey, a lot of other brands are really missing the mark on delivering that experience beyond just the product and looking at how can we support them through the app, how can we support them through phone, email, chat, and really connect with the customers. I think that is such an essential piece of any product-based business that a lot of our competitors have missed the mark on. So we're thinking outside of just the product experience itself into other areas of digital experiences that could be equally powerful as well.
That's awesome. And what I see that you've been really customer focused and centric to that problems that you're solving. And that way you can build that core of people around your product. And then once you start to release new functionality or new pieces into the market, they'll be your test bed, but they're also going to be the people that are going to drive it to the market. They're the ones that are going to be talking about and promoting how great of a service you provided for them. Trung, in your experience, as you've kind of gone through this life cycle, you've got your product into market, you've made this leap into the second phase. Where did you decide how I'm going to build this? Where am I going to manufacture it? To Kevin's point originally, manufacturing is my end goal. Where did you decide to do this, and what did that process look like?
So we always knew this was before the new U.S. tariffs came into effect. We always knew that the U.S. market was going to be the bigger market. So even though we're a Canadian corporation, when we got quoted both in Canada and the U.S., the price was just too insanely high to manufacture here. So we always knew that we eventually had to go to China to manufacture. So during the second year, the first year was just R&D and prototyping. During the second year of the company, we flew over to China, a few of us, and we vetted over, I'm going to say close to 14 factories. I think it was 14, but we vetted a few factories, a lot of factories that we were referred to from other hardware companies in the space. And we ended up choosing one factory. The factory we ended up going with is the same factory responsible for the majority of Huawei cell phone developments and LG. And they had a division for smart home that they were growing. So they were willing to work with us. They were the most high quality factory as well at the lowest cost as well, probably because they had the whole economies of scale. But we went over to China. We actually had to stay in China throughout the entire setup process and during the first manufacturing, because just because you have a design doesn't mean that it's done. Like, the factory's not going to just make it for you. You really have to go over there and manage it. You have to go set up the test rigs and process, which is a painful process in itself. The factory is just a factory. They're just going to make the parts, make the PCB, make the plastics, but they could screw up any time in the process. And we've had our fair share of screw ups throughout the process and a lot of learning lessons. But once you get through the first few batches of production, you know what works, what doesn't work. You refine your quality control process, but that does take a lot of time, but you do learn a lot from that. Now what we do differently is we actually have a full-time team member in China that oversees the factory, oversees procurement, quality, all of that. So it came at the right time because we hired them just before COVID hit. So we no longer have to fly there personally, and they can manage that process.
I like that. And Kevin, maybe you can give us this overview shot of what this all looks like. Is there a 10-step process for a company to go through? It sounds like Ava and the teams, they had to go through a learning process. So it was, how do I learn to build my product? Because there isn't a roadmap. And maybe you have, for the audience, maybe you have a 5-step process where we can all understand what the little steps are that could put it in our mind to say, hey, this is what I got to go after. This is what I got to start with and move forward with.
Yeah, Jeffrey, solid question. I'll give a breakdown, just kind of an end-to-end perspective at a high level. So first things first, you're focusing on manufacturing. We talked about it. Second thing, actually, I liked how you coined it, hyper niche. Okay, so you've got that. So you're focusing on manufacturing. You've got your hyper niche product idea. You've stripped down all your features to your very core, awesome feature that you're going to do, maybe 2 features you're going to do, and now you're ready to go. From Mako's perspective, the timeline we generally look at for a consumer electronic product is 3 months for focusing on that niche, doing your hardcore kind of research conceptualization, and doing your actual concept industrial design CAD modeling. So actually building your 3D CAD models, which if done properly should be done, as always, planning for production, right? So it's not blue sky ideas. You should be starting your CAD models with the first thought, how am I actually going to build this thing physically, technologically? How's that going to get done? So that's your first 3 months. The next 6 months is your key in development. That is where you do your hardcore engineering, your rough prototyping, and your refined prototyping. Probably for a product like either Valerie or Trung's, you'd be doing 2 or 3 or 4 full stack prototypes. That means you're doing a fully designed, fully engineered prototype, building it, testing it, finding pain points, finding opportunities, cleaning it up, building your next model. Your first one's probably kind of rough around the edges, rough electronics, rough prototype. Your second one should be much nicer, much more refined, used for proper testing. Your third one ideally would be like absolutely primo. Like that thing looks like it's off the production line, and that's what you're using to actually really test and refine. The reason we put such an emphasis onto that middle phase is so that when you're actually ready to go into production, you like Trung mentioned, they're just a manufacturer. You want them to do zero thinking. When we send over our products for production, whether it's in China or Canada or the US, we are telling the manufacturer precisely how to make that thing in almost every way, how we want it tooled, the type of materials that we're using, the type of processes that we want, all the spec data behind all of that. Then not only that, but we're also verifying and confirming both with boots on the ground and remotely to see exactly how they're doing it, because they're always going to make little changes, materials changes. Maybe they have a different tooling method. They're going to change how that part's actually built. We need to know every step of the way precisely how they're changing it, because they miss a lot of things. They're trying to get the part made. They aren't thinking about the end goal. So that process now, so you've got your 3 months up front, 6 months in hardcore prototyping and R&D, and then you're probably anywhere from 3 to 6 months in production, depending on how many hiccups you have. And then of course you're probably another month or 2 by the time you've actually got units landed at your end buyer. Or if you're pre-selling, obviously you can push that a bit, but realistically speaking, a year in full R&D and then a few months on top of that. And that is considered, as both Trung and Valerie probably tell you, that's very condensed. That's very fast. But in the startup field, our goal as a design firm is to accelerate that, do things at a high quality, but also do it fast so you can get to market quickly, especially if the client is very good at focusing on that MVP, right? Keeping it clean, keeping it tight. That'll iron out 90% of your headaches if you really focus on less features. As a quick note to that, less features is great for many reasons, but that means it's cheaper to develop, faster to develop, easier to develop in manufacturing, less defects in manufacturing, less returns, happier customers, better reviews. You name it. I've probably missed a few things there, right? But it's just the more simple, the more hyper-focused you can be, the exponentially better your process will be in developing a product. And don't worry, those awesome features like Trung did in his version 2.0, build them then. When you have way more money, user feedback, you understand the product better, you understand manufacturing better, then you can work on, okay, what's our next version? What's our pro version? What's our version 2.0 going to be? And go from there.
It's amazing. So the whole process is really condensed down to about a year, maybe a year and a half tops to get a product in there into market. Now, how much has the industry changed over since you started? Maybe you said 15, 20 years ago. How much has it changed from when prototyping was 15 years ago to today? And was that technology change, did anything like the printing side, because you can prototype using these amazing printers now, is that speeding the process up to get your prototypes done quicker? Or is it just part of the mix and you've already condensed it down using that timeline?
It's exponentially better now in prototyping. We can prototype anything now to be very, very close, sometimes better than production, which is so valuable because the client always wants this pretty thing that they can play and they can, raise investment. That's great. Of course, that matters. But as a design firm, we're looking at production. Really, the value of the prototype is using a very good, well-built prototype to actually find your kinks before you actually get into production. It's more expensive in that middle phase to do that, to go through those prototype rounds, but it's exponentially less expensive in the long run when you don't have to deal with production defects down the road. So the amount of, and you mentioned, how has it changed in 15 years? It's changing every 6 months. The amount of tools and resources and partners, we're even starting to get to the point of short run manufacturing. How are we producing 50, 100 units using additive methodologies and other methodologies, reverse silicon casts, all this sort of stuff to make production quality units in a short run, test it with the market, get some user feedback, make iterative changes, then release the next version, and so on. So you're actually releasing new versions every 6 to 12 months, as opposed to every 2 to 3 or 5 years. And every year there's more and better and stronger technology. But now, especially 2021, the amount of technology, it's really condensed that development cycle, but not just condensed it, but made it so much better in terms of your end product quality result. It's really an incredible time to be in hardware for many reasons.
I love it. I'm getting goosebumps. That's how exciting this is. This is good. I love this. Valerie, can you give us an idea of how important, now you've got this product, you've spent a year to a year and a half building this, how important is branding? Is brand the number one thing and you start that right away? Because I'm going to guess a lot of the audience is like, I'll build it, they'll come because this is an amazing invention. How much of the time do you have to put into actually branding and getting out to the market so that people will know who you are before you even finish your product?
Yeah, so I would say it's very important to build from the ground up. And as someone who has a bias because I came out of the branding world, I think it's very important because it could be what sets you apart from your competitor. It could be what makes or breaks when someone is on your website and they're deciding whether or not to purchase. That could be the deciding factor. So it's something that from the very beginning we had really tried to build after we talked to our audience and really understood who they were. To be able to build something that really resonated with them. Actually, in the start of our company, we were a very different looking company. So you can still see it on our Indiegogo campaign. We had this very space age looking, sharp edge brand. And it was, our initial hypothesis was that it would be appealing for people who were more on the DIY side, who had been tinkering around with hydroponics and really wanted something that took it to the next level. So that was our original hypothesis. And we thought it was going to be more male focused. And as you can see now, we've actually rounded out a lot more of the brand into lowercase, a lot more rounded soft edges, which is kind of similar to our product design. It is more feminine looking. There's rounder edges. It's not as rigid and space age as it was before. And that was a very big deliberate choice because we realized, hey, we're building a product for the wrong audience. And the end user is not going to be somebody who is that type of person, although it could be, but the larger audience out there and the mass market for this product is going to be somebody who's looking for not as stark and masculine of a product or a brand, but something that could be more visually appealing and more Apple-esque, so to speak. So we really pivoted a lot of our branding pretty early on after we launched our Indiegogo campaign and got that feedback and integrated it into the product design. So that's why our product actually looks a little different from that video, was, making sure that even the fine lines and edges that go into the industrial design really match our branding and everything like that. So everything down to our unboxing design, we really thought about the process, and our unboxing design is quite a process and really, really amazing kind of like unboxing experience with zero waste. And that was deliberately, intended for a premium product experience, just basically feeding back into that whole premium branding model for the right customer. And that's kind of how we built the branding from day one, and iterating just as much as we were iterating on the product design itself.
Awesome. So you took this Indiegogo platform and utilized that as a way to learn more from the customers that were wanting to buy your product, and then shifted and hyper-focused in on the needs that they were looking for because they became your customer. They already were because they bought into it, but you really looked at them and said, hey, this is actually good information here. We should turn this into helping us refine our product and get rid of the edges, or get rid of maybe it was more focused on, as you mentioned, the herbal growing in the male industry, and you said, wait a second, our demographic's been 70% women, and they're really focused on soft and light lines, so maybe we'll focus on that. So it sounds like you really listened in and accomplished some great change.
Thank you.
Trung, on your side, you kind of gone through all these different pieces to get to this phase 2. You've got the branding, you've had to reinitialize your branding. Now you guys are doing something really cool that I wanted to touch base on, because now we've gone through this life journey of how to build a product and where we're going, and now there's this financing side, and we got to dive into that because we only have so much time today, but I think it's something worth touching on. But you're getting into this growth stage, and when you're in a growth stage coming out with product 2, you really need to hit the market hard and fast. So can you give us an idea of the types of things you guys have been looking at? You mentioned that you raised the manufacturing funds. Now you're getting into a SPAC, or I guess there's a different terminology. Maybe you can explain a little bit of that to the audience so they can understand more about how you're going to the market.
So financing is kind of my main priority at the company. And as a hardware company, you're going to need a lot more money, not just for operations, but inventory is a big pain in the butt. So financing was one of the big focuses for me throughout the entire years. You have your traditional angels and VCs that will kind of get you up, started and running, families and friends and whatnot. We went through traditional seed round, convertible notes, private funding. I always like to say when your back is pushed against the wall, you kind of think a lot more creatively. So early on, we're trying to figure out how to get inventory finance, because what we were doing at the early stages was we were just opening up pre-orders through our website and providing a discount. So a customer goes to our website, we would use Facebook ads to acquire the customer. They would get a 20% discount if they prepay ahead of time. We would accumulate all that funding, place an order in China, wait a few months to get the inventory, then ship to the end consumers. You're going to get some cancellations in the run, but then you're always raising funds that way. That's not sustainable in the long run. That will get you some customers, but a lot of customers don't want to place a pre-order. Some customers want the product to be shipped right away. So with that traction, we were able to raise venture debt, which is basically a loan that allows you to finance for the inventory. And then during this time, Clearbank was launched. So Clearbank was another kind of layer of financing. But there's also these interesting financing structures that's available for US corporations and not Canadians. There's 2 services I tapped into in the States. One is called KickFurther. The other one's called KickPay. KickFurther is, it's kind of like Kickstarter in the sense that you have the crowd financing your inventory, but they're not getting the product. They're getting an interest return. So they're actually lending you the money and you're just paying them back at a certain date with interest, and you specify those terms. So I would put up a campaign on KickFurther. I would say I need 150 grand to finance this inventory. They would I would be able to raise off the platform. The platform would then pay my suppliers in China, and this could be pre-production as well. So they would pay for the entire procurement throughout the whole manufacturing process. That could take 6 months to 9 months to even a year, and then a year later, that's when you pay them when you start shipping the inventory. So KickFurther is one, and another one's called KickPay. A KickPay is similar to KickFurther, but instead of raising from the crowd, it's one institutional investor that invests in your product, but takes security over your inventory. So there's these interesting inventory financing structures that are available for US corporations, but not Canadians. How we got around that was we simply incorporated a US Delaware C Corp, and you can use Stripe for this. Stripe has a program called Atlas. Just incorporate through their program, funnel all your inventory financing through that corporation, and that's how you kind of raise money from these US institutions and these US investors. So that's what we did for the inventory financing side. Then when COVID hit, a lot of the VC funding dried up for hardware companies and even consumer companies. So we started looking at retail raises in the States. So there is a process called Regulation A+, which allows Canadian and US corporations to raise from retail investors in the States. They call it like a mini IPO, but you're not publicly traded. It's similar to equity crowdfunding, but there's huge regulations around it, what you can say and what you can't say. But the idea is that if you have a huge following and you're a B2C company, you have a huge email list, it strengthens your ability to raise investor dollars from retail investors. So both accredited and non-accredited investors, you can invest as little as $500, $200. You set those terms, you set the valuation, you set the share structure, you set all of that. The process itself could take 6 months before you launch. But when you launch, essentially the fate of your company is in your own hands. You don't have to rely on a VC or in one institution, or you don't have to rely on meeting 1,000 VCs and getting 999 no's and just one yes. This is everything that you could do online. So this is something that we're planning to do soon. We should be launched in a matter of days, to be honest. But when we do, it allows anybody in the world to invest in us. And it allows us to use our strengths in digital marketing to acquire those investors, just like we did with acquiring customers online. So that's something that we're doing now. And the round size is much bigger than a traditional inventory financing where you might be raising a couple $100,000 to $1 or $2 million. This round size would be upwards of 15 million.
Amazing. That's, I'm going to say, very valuable information. I think that that part we might have to, you'll have to go back and rewatch it, because for me to explain all of that would probably leave us without any time to keep talking. But I think from an overall perspective, I think that from an entrepreneur side, like you said, backups against the wall, you need to figure out how to get this inventory funded. There are different vehicles out there that you have to look for, and being able to jump into this Regulation A+ or Kick Further or Kick Pay, I think those are really amazing vehicles to look at, especially when inventory costs are high and you need to get your product to market. Those things make a big difference. Kevin, is there any rule of thumb that you can give us on inventory and what people will look like when they are building out their product? If it's their first run, second run, what do you recommend people do? Obviously, I got to get in people's hands, I got to help them sell it, but there's also being cautious and not overspending your budget. Is there any recommendations in the field or what and how you guys operate that you recommend to the startups or the businesses you work with?
Yeah, the quick answer is produce as few amounts of units as the producer will allow. Negotiate the heck out of that. That's your first run. There's absolutely no reason to do a huge volume. In fact, most people aren't making money on their first production run. You shouldn't worry about your making money on your first production run. You should be worried about limiting your risk, getting units into people's hands, using that as a test bed to, make improvements if necessary going down the road. But your first production run isn't the one that you're negotiating 50,000 units to get the best price. It's negotiating 500 units as opposed to 1,000, which is a major difference in terms of cash flow. And even if you have to pay a slightly higher amount, one of the things that we've done over the years at Mako, especially with our overseas producers, especially in China, is really driven them to say, if you want to work with Mako Design, you have to give our clients good terms on small production runs. And that's the only way you're going to get these new clients. You'll get a lot of them, but you have to do this for them to establish a relationship. They're not going to make any money on the first production run. Our clients aren't making any money. Mako doesn't make any money either on production. But what matters there is that's kickstarting off the business, because after they have it, what I really like about, and I wouldn't mind taking just a quick note here on financing, because what Trung was talking about is many amazing options for scaling your product business, which is very important because that's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's what all people, whether they're in super startup mode or in development mode, you have to be thinking manufacturing. Manufacturing is what then leads to the big conversations about scaling. How do you create a multi-million-dollar empire now that you're in manufacturing and you've got users that love what you're doing? If you take one step before that, you've got your essentially development funding. And development funding, there's many options for that. Most of it is friends and family. A big consideration that you have to think about in terms of development money is institutional financing or VC financing or even professional grade seed financing does not or very rarely funds super early stage R&D, like your sketching, your CAD design, even your early prototypes. What's key for a product person is to understand the further that you push it, the exponentially better valuation you're going to get for your business and the exponentially higher probability that an investor is actually going to jump on board. So as at the idea phase, nobody's investing in you. At the CAD phase, maybe friends and family, if they really like you. At the prototyping phase, the rough prototyping, probably not. Again, you're still proving out your tech. Now, when you get into the refined prototyping phase, okay, you're in a real nice sweet spot. You've got the product and you've got a pathway to manufacturing. Okay, now you're looking good. Take it one step further. Now you're ready for essentially pre-financing, like Valerie did in terms of Indiegogo. You can actually use a very nice prototype that's ready to go into production to start pre-selling products, which is a big way that many clients are actually funding their production runs now, or at least funding part of that production run. Again, you're not going to make money at that point in time. The big picture thinking here when it comes to financing, if you're just getting into it or whatever else, is to know that, if you look back 15 years ago, there is almost nothing out there to help hardware startups get off the ground. And over the years, it started to evolve. In fact, as you started saying, oh, wait, but we've got a hardware product, but we put a chip in it or connects to an app or, it has some sort of underlying digital technology. All of a sudden, all the VCs and angels are saying, okay, well, we didn't used to do hardware products or gadgets or inventions, but now that you say it's a tech hardware invention, we're interested. And then, of course, you've got all the hardware incubators and all the university incubators and all these different funding sources. Now there's all these different platforms coming out to fund different ways. By the way, there's one in Canada too called Front Funder that helps on the scaling perspective to raise public funds for scaling your business too. So, and of course, Jeffrey, you've got an incredible institution with OPN that helps with many assets of financing these businesses at various phases. So, if you're listening, check out what Jeffrey's working on at OPN, really understand all the different verticals of OPN. It's an incredible organization, but just know that I would argue there's got to be 50 times more financing now for hardware startups and support and services and scaling than there was 20 or 30 years ago. Like it's an amazing time to be, not only from a development standpoint, as we talked about earlier, but for funding. And of course, as Trung's talking about, scaling the product business to really take it big time.
I love it. And well shared. I think being able to start your journey and work your way through all the different phases and learning where you're taking money from, where you're going to get people to come in and join, and where you're going to get the support from, all the way to the hyper growth stage, all really valuable information. I guess now, just because of the timing, and I honestly say we could talk about this for another few hours because it's I find it very exciting. That maybe the way we'll round this off is maybe you guys can give maybe 1 or 2 points that you would share to a startup on helping them de-risk the opportunity, help them figure out, how do I get to market quicker, more effectively? And what are those recommendations? Maybe 1 or 2 things that you think, and maybe Valerie, you can start and just give us an idea of what you think is the best way for someone who's like, I'm dying to break into this market. I want to start a hardware company.
There's so many things. I would say the one big thing for hardware startups, as you have kind of heard, it takes a lot of cash to be able to launch something, especially if you're in the $199 to $399 price range. You're going to have to build inventory. You're going to have to hire a team. If you have IoT, you're going to have to spend that money. So making sure you have really good cash planning and work with someone who can help you with supply chain as well as the cash flow side. I think that's something that I wish we did way earlier. So that's one thing. The second thing is making sure when you are looking at investors that they understand your industry and they could be really values add, because if the values don't align or if it's not in their investment thesis, certain things like milestones, certain things like, the way you're building your product, that might not always translate well to the investor, and that could result in tension. So that's another thing to watch out for. And a third thing is make sure that you're building that product hand in hand with your customers from day one. Don't build a product that no one will buy, and after you spent $1 million getting that inventory and getting the engineering done. So make sure you're not making those $1 million mistakes, and do that as early as you can.
Awesome. I love it. Kevin.
So I've got one big tip we didn't talk about today, which will absolutely smooth out the process, but it needs to be put in context. So, in order, you focus on your ultra niche. Then you understand that manufacturing is the goal. You know that there's different opportunities for financing along the way, and you develop a high quality but low feature set version of your product to get there. The last piece, which we didn't talk about, is more of a personal and individualized one. And this is just as important as all the others combined. And that comes down to hustle. I have now seen well over 1,000 entrepreneurs try in this space. And it's become almost indisputable what differentiates the winners from the losers. And it's all those things we talked about are great, but the number one thing that somebody can do to win is hustle. I have watched terrible ideas with mediocre inventors chunk their way through it and become successful far more often than I've watched very sophisticated people with strong amounts of funding completely, do it as a kind of a side hobby. They come around it every week or two, or maybe every month, whenever it's convenient, and succeed. Those ones never succeed. And the hustlers almost always succeed. So it doesn't mean that you have to, work from 6 a.m. to midnight, but it does mean that every day spend a little bit of effort on your job, but set it in your calendar. So set aside 2, 3, 4 hours every day to progress that thing forward. If you do that combined with the other tips that you heard here today, you will almost certainly succeed, or at least have a very, very good chance at it, be in one of the top brackets. And even arguably so, if you fail, you're not going to fail flat on your face. You'll probably fail, maybe not making as much money as you thought you would, or you get bought out too early or whatever else. But very rarely, if somebody puts in the hustle, follows a proper structure, do they actually fall flat on their face in the hardware space, because the industry is just absolutely booming right now. And you're sitting on that golden nugget of an idea, which hopefully and should be new and proprietary.
I love it. And if from an investor standpoint, I like to find CEOs that are hustlers, but really, I like to call them, they're psychotic, and all they care about is figuring out how to make it work, how to make it happen. And if they're psychotic enough, they'll know everything about the space, they'll know everything that needs to happen, and they'll be driving forward. I had a text message this morning from, I can't believe you called that lady a psychotic on your podcast. I said, that's the type of people we like to invest in. They need to be psychotic. All right, Trung, what are you thinking? What's left on the page that we haven't talked to that you want to share?
So I think what I would recommend is really learn the process. And we follow the NPI process, new product introduction. And it kind of wraps everything up that we've been discussing about how to get a product to market. I think one thing, especially in hardware, that everyone needs to understand, that it's a waterfall process where everything has to be planned ahead of time before you even pull the trigger. It's not like software development where it's an agile process where you could iterate every week or every 2 weeks and launch a new version in the App Store. It is a process that takes time, and if you screw up and make the wrong decision, it could screw up everything. So follow the NPI process, really come up with the constraints and the requirements for the product, which the NPI process lays out. It incorporates everything from research, customer feedback, everything we've discussed. But if you follow a very sound process, I think you guys will do well.
I love it. And just to iterate, guys, I think from some of the points that I took from that, it's I'm a big one on numbers. So cash planning is right at the top of the list. You're not going to survive if you can't figure out how to manage your money. And then, of course, you're getting into that niche, manufacturing, high quality, low functionality. Just get the product out there and test it. And then learn the waterfall process. I love that. The NPI side of it, learn that this is a slow run. It takes a year to build a product. That's not fast. You can build a website in 3 months. You can do things like that. So this is a long process, and work with your customers. Figure out what they're looking for and learn from that so you can build a kick-ass product. But you know what? At the end of the day, guys, I think that I learned a lot. I took notes. This is me. I'm writing away as we go because I think this is phenomenal. Even I can go back and listen to the video again, but my brain says I got to write this down so I won't forget it. But that was awesome. I appreciate all your time today, guys. We're going to blast this all out over the upcoming weeks. But thank you again for all your insights. All the best in your builds. And we'll be chatting with you guys all again soon. But thank you again for all the feedback and insights into making your hardware endeavor easy.